Good morning. You are on Daily Huddle. Wherever you are listening to this, you are in the right place. And today, Giovanni and I are engaging in a conversation that I don't want to say it's a little bit controversial, but here is what we're saying. We're saying that DEI versus merit is a false debate. And through this conversation, we hope that you'll find out here's what really hurting your company's culture. So, Gio, I spent the weekend immersed in a particular world. I visited the Rosa Parks Museum in Montgomery, and I found myself immersed on both sides, right? Whether I found myself immersed in the contribution and the commitment of what I call the ancestors, whether it's the founding fathers or the people who struggled for civil rights for Black people. I found myself really immersed in the commitment they had to transform something. Whether they're dead or alive, they're still playing that game. And I was inspired to the sense that I started thinking about, well, gosh, what's all the hoopla about diversity, equity, and inclusion versus merit? Is it really the case that when a company or business owner veers in this direction and focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion, they have the best opportunity to attract talent and retain talent? Or is it that when a company and a business owner focuses on merit only, that they have the best opportunity to attract and retain talent? And Gio, I'm discovering maybe that there is something amiss about that. Like maybe this debate between DEI and merit is just a distraction. One other thing that ends up leaving people who are concerned for building a high performance culture and concerned for attracting good talent and retaining them, they get distracted from doing that job. And they get sucked into this false debate. What are your thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah, I really like this conversation, Cyril. Thank you for creating it and for inviting us to be in the inquiry of the debate. Or that is not a debate, but maybe where the social conversation finds itself in, given the political climate, that it sucks away the opportunity of the entire conversation. Here's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of times, you and I get a chance to work in so many different companies and so many different industries, which for us or for me, Sorrel, allows me to see people, a very diverse group of people everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, I have every walk of life, every past. I work with companies who only hire people from prisons. I work with, well, not only, but predominantly, right? People who've been in jail and all, they do drugs and they have no screening process. It's an interesting environment. And then I work with an environment which are only an African American predominantly company, or uh, what we would call an Anglo company. They're mostly people that are white who are in the company, or I work with companies to have a really diverse group of people, everybody from all walks of life, from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, Hispanics, and they're kind of working together. And so one of the questions that I get asked often is, well, how do you work with everybody? How is it that you work with everybody? How is it that it's simple for you to work with everybody? Why is it not a big deal where you're from and what you like and what you don't like? And so what I've discovered over the years that I have been sort of dismissing, I've been too familiar for me. It's a little bit of what you're pointing to. And I want to say something about that. So it's become a little familiar, which is, well, one of the things that I've learned to do, and maybe naturally, is that I understand my brain. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that I understand that my brain has biases, unconscious biases or conscious biases. I understand my brain has that. So I don't make myself wrong for that. And I also understand that people's brains have conscious biases and unconscious biases, and I don't make them wrong for that. What I'm And so whenever I see myself sort of reacting to a particular human being, or naturally like, oh, you're different from me, like like I was at a flooring company not long ago, right? And the executive team were only white guys, right? And they were like police officers, and they were only white. And then when they saw me, the Hispanic guy with an accent talking about communication, they were, I mean, they were like this. Like, really? Like, really? They brought this guy? And I saw it, right? And it was like loud. And the lady that brought me, she was like a little ashamed, like how strong they were being, right? And I wanted to, I wanted to say something funny, but what was there for me, Sorel, was a real compassion for the brain, a real
Yeah.
compassion, right? So I said to them, now I'm going to talk about what maybe you guys are thinking about, but you won't say it. And it's that you may find yourself thinking that how could I possibly understand what you're dealing with if we're so different? So when I said that, I saw some of them, not all of them, going like you read our mind? And I thought, like, I saw them relax a little bit. And I said, we're going to talk about communication. Now, what's perfect about communication, and then I went straight to them. What's perfect about communication is that what makes communication effective is when you're willing to notice what your biases are.
Yeah.
Then we can discover where the communication is missing. For example, then I said, I'm a Hispanic man with an accent. And you guys are from probably around here. This was North Georgia, too. You guys are from around here, and you might have an unconscious bias about the accent. Let's talk about it. And then they were like, okay, let's talk about it. And so we were able to create a space where they could say what was unconscious to them, right? I love one thing you told me a while ago, not long ago, Sora, when you said, well, you see, when you people that look like you, that act like you, your brain says, ooh. And so your brain triggers dopamine. Your brain says party. Your brain says it's all right. So it's easier at the level of the brain, if you will, to adjust to people that look like you. However, in the world of high-performing cultures, that could limit the possibility of having the best team for your company if I don't understand these conscious biases. So that's where I want to start the conversation. Was it followable?
And it happens on the other side too, Gio. Totally followable. And so we first started this conversation by saying, well, is there really a debate? DEI versus merit? Because the thing is, if there were a bunch of business owners, like there are right now, right here, if we're in a group of 100 business owners and we say, raise your hand if all you want to do is hire people like you, even if they're incompetent, how many do you think would raise their hands? Nobody would raise their hands, right? So business owners don't deliberately go out to look for people just like them. So this merit versus DEI debate is bogus because people want the best talent. People want to reduce turnover. People want a culture of high performance. But what you're pointing to is that people have two blind spots. The first blind spot you talked about, Gio, is that when I see somebody I recognize, somebody who looks just like me, speaks just like me, acts just like me, may even dress like me. You know, people used to dress for success, and dressing for success was literally, well, dress like the people who are going to interview you. Like that. When I see that, my brain, your brain, people's brains secrete dopamine. It gives me a reward. So I do it over and over. And people may have the tendency,
And
instead
that
of,
creates an unconscious bias.
it does.
It creates an unconscious. It's like I'm not aware of it.
I'm not aware of it. And in the face of that unconscious bias, people forget the real reason they're there, which is to create a group of talented people that will stay there for a long time, and in turn create a culture that engenders high performance. It happens on the other side too, Gio. When I see something or somebody I don't recognize, they don't look like me. They look different, like your situation in North Georgia. My brain, people's brain, have the tendency to pull back and defend unconsciously. That's an unconscious bias.
Unconsciously, and you said it decreases cortisol. Like it's
Yeah,
dangerous. The brain thinks, well, this is dangerous. You look differently, you talk differently, you act differently. At the level of the brain, automatically, it's not personal. At the level of the brain says this could be dangerous. A long, 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 long time ago, somebody from a different tribe was a dangerous person because tribes were violent to each other. So if you saw somebody from a different tribe, you're not from a tribe. What's going to happen here? So at the level of the brain, it creates that cortisol. And so it's easy for a human being to go and say, well, I don't know. There's something about you, it's just different. Because at the level of the brain is saying, watch out, different
yeah,
tribe. And conscious bias. Not that people are naturally, this is when people say, people don't like people that are different. It's not that. It's that there's an unconscious bias at the level of the brain that says if you look different, you could be dangerous. But that comes from years and years and years of an evolution of the brain. People from different tribes could be dangerous, and they were dangerous. When the Spaniards came to the Americas, they came saying, I discovered the new world. No, that's a nice branding opportunity. They knew how to brand, right? They came, everybody, annihilated everybody, just made a mess. And then they became heroes. Jesus Christ, that was so wrong in so many levels. So the brain has been evolving, looking at people that are different in a context of danger.
yeah,
And so now here we are creating a debate on how people are racist or not racist, or married or not married. And it may not, and they might, I like how you said it. It might be a distraction to the really looking.
yeah. It's a
Yeah.
distraction. So think of it this way, Gio. Uh, you've heard people say people do business with people they know, like, and trust. Well, guess what? In the context of the unconscious biases, when somebody shows up and they're just like me, there's the tendency for people's brains to automatically know, like, and trust that person. So it's that kind of bias that we're pointing to, that if you want to create a high performing team, you might pause and say, my brain is doing that thing again. People's brain does that all the time. So in that sense, there's a huge impact on businesses. If you're looking to make the biggest, most important decision in your company, which is this particular hire, be mindful of that, because your decision making is impacted by that unconscious bias. If you're looking to solidify relationships between departments in a company, be mindful of those biases, because they'll weaken the relationships. And if you're looking to impact the company's performance by building a team of high performers, you may miss real talent when you're not aware of these unconscious biases. So in that sense, Gio, the question that begs right now is, so what? I'm conscious of these biases right now. What do we do? where do we go?
Yeah. So here's what I want to say about that, right? And it's not the truth, but I've seen this on the court with hundreds of organizations, and it's powerful. Here's what I want to say. Train people on communication. But a real training on communication, not like have people go watch YouTube videos on being nice. No, that's not going to do it. Or have you people see videos on DEI training. No, that's not going to do it. Like really bring somebody from the outside of your company and train on how to communicate effectively. Why is it important to do that? It is important to do that because for the most part, people don't know that what has people communicate effectively is not what they say, but how they hear. So what do I mean by that? So what makes me effective in communicating with another human being, with all groups of life, what makes me an effective person to communicate is not that I articulate well, or it's not that I understand people's backgrounds, or it's not that I understand their role. What makes me a good communicator is that I understand that my brain makes interpretations constantly, and I'm able to put them on the side. And I'm able to hear people exactly where they're coming from and when they're not, and when they're not coming from. I'm able to check with them. Did I hear right? Did I hear this right? Is this what you're really saying? And there's an interesting thing that happens when people get trained in communication. They start discovering this big tip in communication. And the big tip is this one. When people don't feel heard, often they do crazy things. But being in silent, just being quiet, does not leave people feeling heard. So a real communication training at the level of your directors or at the level of your managers allows them to truly maximize the talent that's already in their teams, because they no longer they're no longer victims of their conscious or unconscious biases. They're no longer victims of that. They're actually listening to where people are, what they have to bring to the table, the love they have, the commitment they have, all the things that a person is looking to create a high performing team. So that's what I want to start where I want to
Yeah,
start.
this is perfect, Gio. And what it's also pointing to is that business owners, executives, and senior leaders need to actually jump first and be people who communicate and listen that way. Because it is in the communicating and listening that way. Because the kind of communication you're pointing to, Jill, we might say it's not mysterious. And here's why. Because it begins with actually noticing the unconscious bias and playing a little hack that disengages the limbic system of the brain that has you not communicate at all and go with the unconscious bias. So that's a critical skill, the skill of disengaging the limbic system and now engaging and communicating from the perspective you're talking about, where the real work of selecting team members, of working with team members, of selecting a new hire, that real work begins and is done in the listening and the communication you're pointing to. And what we're saying is that in the space of the unconscious biases, that kind of communication doesn't happen. People go with the first assumptions that their brains make, and you call them interpretations. Man, I've hired the best person for this job. Funny thing, that person looks just like me. So
Sometimes
communication is key.
Or the other thing that I see that happens, Sorrel, is absent of a training like the one we're pointing to, a real training in communication, not a video, a real training communication. There is likely, and this I see this very often, that one manager does not speak with the other manager, even if they look like each other. They're like, well, I just that guy or that girl doesn't really get my goals, doesn't really get how I am committed to this, to the end result. That person is committed to something else. That person doesn't care about the company. That care doesn't care about the core values. And all of those are unconscious biases.
Right.
Unconscious biases. So when we tell people, okay, now you're going to go talk to him. Now you're going to go talk to her. You're going to go discover something about this person. They say, no, I don't want to. I don't want to go talk to that person. No, why not? Well, because they're different. They don't understand. Oh, okay. Well, in order for you to see whether they're different or they don't understand, you've got to talk to them. Talk to them. Often, more often than not, people don't have the tools to have a conversation that might occur as difficult. They don't have the tools. So they rather not talk. They rather continue business as usual. And the company will continue to have the same holes. And
Yeah.
then, like you often like to say, we throw money, we throw talent, we throw the resources, but if people don't talk to each other,
It stays the same.
it stays the same.
Yeah.
Whether it is because you look like me or whether you look like different than me, or whether you are look different or the same, we still need to talk. And this is where, for me, the debate between DEI versus merit is a distraction, when it's irrelevant. People are not talking no matter what.
Yeah.
And this is why I say,
Yeah. So one of the things I'm discovering right now, Giovanni, this is not the conversation, the last conversation in this matter, because either way, what we're looking at is that, wow, whether you consider merit or DEI, building a high performing team and selecting the right talent and retaining them is not for the faint of heart. It requires communication. So let's promise each other that we're going to continue this. At this point, though, I'd love to hear from who is here. What do you want to say? What questions do you have? What comments do you want to make to create for yourself your position inside of this world? DEI versus merit, a false debate. Andrea, are you raising your hand without raising your hand?
I am, and it was more like a comment instead of a question, but it could be, it could become a question. So the discussion about this rhetoric that puts diversity as DI and merit as opposed as being 180 is truly, my opinion, counterproductive. Both want the same thing. Both want a fair chance for somebody. You're putting it in a perspective from the team members or from inside, but also from an outside. Either you're applying for a job or you want to become a vendor of this company. So it's just, I just want to have a fair chance to pursue all my power and all the knowledge that I have and be rewarded, be paid for that, right? So it's a transaction. The point that I want to emphasize here is, yes, communication is key. True training communication is key, because those making decisions about who you, either a vendor of a company or an employee of a company, is going to have a fair chance to compete. It's when those rhetoric and counterproductive discussions happen, because you don't start from the same point that others that don't look like you may start. I don't know if you've seen that it's an artistic drawing about the difference between equity and equality. In equity, the boxes of the people looking at the field are different because the shorter person needs a taller box. That's the only thing that when training in communication, you need to understand where you're coming from, what your background is, and the person that you are interviewing or making a decision for, becoming a vendor, they need to be balanced. It needs to be kind of a fair starting point. That's the only. So I see it. I don't know if it's a bogus discussion. I like the discussion about the difference between that DEI and merit, but I see it more as a counterproductive because truly in reality, both want the same thing. The problem becomes when you stay in that bubble and you only hear one side of the equation and don't hear the other one. Don't open your eyes to have this fair notion that anybody has the skills to do the job and should not be penalized for the way that they look, the gender they have, the identity as they identify. It is all about counterproductive when it's not a discussion about let's have a fair start. That's the comment. I don't know if my question to you guys is counterproductive a word that you guys have experienced when you're training people in communications? Is it something that triggers your brain, that word of counterproductive, because both want the same, but now it becomes politicized? I don't know. I'm extending too much, but
Oh, no,
passionate
this
about
is
this
this.
coming from a Hispanic woman, because it also includes people that are not, that make decisions are the majority don't look like me.
Yeah, this is perfect. You're pointing to the when people engage in the DEI versus merit debate, it is counterproductive because they end up not paying attention to what they really want, which is good talent and a culture of high performance. So it's counterproductive. The other piece that's counterproductive, which you're pointing to, is a singular focus on one end or the other of the spectrum. To focus specifically on diversity, equity, and inclusion and say that's the aim, that also is a pitfall. And focus on merit all alone is also counterproductive. So it's not as clear cut as people would want it to be. So what's counterproductive as a whole for people is they do not operate as if they have those unconscious biases.
Exactly.
And
They don't they're not open to training, they're not open to change their biases, again, that they know or they don't, and they stay in their little bubble. And that's problematic because staying in your little bubble is not going to allow you to see talent that may come and should come from other people that don't look like you.
You know what I've noticed, there's conscious bias and unconscious bias, right? It's something I've noticed in the journey. And then also what I've noticed is that there's just these two worlds. Since I'm a consultant, I'm all about training people. That's all I care about. We've got to train people. Training people is the source of high performance. Ultimately, people are the ones that are going to implement the ideas, and are going to work together. And so where I find myself in occasions is enrolling people in being trained. It's like, no, I don't want to. I don't need to be trained. I don't need to be trained. So where I see in the context of this conversation that it's useful is what I have found to be useful is to, in some ways, I'm trying to say it right, so I'm going to say it wrong. I can't tell people that they're doing the wrong job. They're doing it wrong. Because if I tell them they're doing it wrong, they'll defend themselves. And then they'll be right about it. This is what it's what I have found over the years. However, they are aware of the holes they have. They're aware of them. So what I have found is, well, how do I tell people who don't look like me, who normally don't hire me, or don't see me as a possibility, how do I tell people that an outside perspective that will help them with their holes that they have? And that's where I have found, without them having to defend themselves, without them having to corner themselves on guilt or shame. And that's where I have found that I've been able to go into rooms and create possibilities in rooms that I never had a chance before. That's what I have found. And so what I'm in some degree trying to say is, and this is not the truth, in the context of what you're saying, Andrea, of I want to get a fair chance. I want a fair chance for myself also. And what I have found in this interesting conversation is that going towards the bull, that the conversation is towards the bull, like facing the bull in front. The way we say it in Spanish is el toro por los cuernos. How do you say that in English?
Yeah, I don't know, but
Taking the bull by the horns.
Mhm.
Taking the bull by the horns has not worked. Has not worked in my line of, in my field. The way it has worked for me, it has by having the bull see himself as the limitations of being a bull, but not confronting him. It's what I have found in this world that sees, that has unconscious and conscious biases about other people. I hope that was followable. I was trying to make it followable. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I was projecting a little bit when you were speaking, because for me, has not worked. I actually had to face the bull, telling it like it is, because that's how it works. And then that's why I believe, and I've been studying a lot, those DEI policies exist in a company for people that are not like me, that are going to be more quiet and they need a fair state. And so not DEI policies exist because not of all of us are equal. So we cannot expect to fight the fight as everybody does, or as you do, showing the bull how they can become a softer bull or a more understanding bull. So that's why I believe that's my belief right now. At this time, in the period that we're living right now, it could be counterproductive, the discussion between diversity and merit. In my opinion, right now, we need to be a little bit more skewed to protecting those who don't look like the rest of the people making decisions. Right now, we're not yet, in my opinion, in a balanced environment. Until we get there, by all means, let's put merit and DEI at the same level. Right now, my opinion, we're not. So I'm all about keeping those policies as much as possible.
Thank you, Andrea. And I think Andrea gives us a good segue to say this. If you look out in nature, Andrea, you'll see that what we human beings call diversity, equity, and inclusion is actually the way of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Ecosystems require diversity to survive.
Yep.
Absent diversity, equity, and inclusion, entire ecosystems get decimated and collapsed. So it is a law of nature. And I love to say it this way. Whenever human beings try to defy laws of nature, they pay for it dearly. So our call to action isn't to confront the bull by head on. And it's not to not do that either. Mm-hmm. It's all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And in the context of seeing all of it for what it is, you, the business owner, you, the human being I'm speaking to right now, get to confront that what it is to be a human being is to have unconscious biases. And when you have unconscious biases and you couple that with the laws of nature that I'm pointing to, you end up putting structures in place to ensure that we human beings need to put structures in place to ensure that we don't let our unconscious biases rob us of the performance we really want. No one would ever say they don't want a high-performing team. No one would ever say they don't want a culture that works. So maybe we need some structures to keep us from killing ourselves. Jill, let's go ahead and end it there, brother.
Thank you, Sorrel. Yeah. I so want to continue this conversation, but we shall end it here. Thank you all for being here. Virtue, Kurt, Maria, Sangria, Andrea, thank you for being here and engaging the possibility of this conversation. And the intention of this conversation is to give us different tools, different perspectives to continue to create progress, affinity, love, smile, eat more plant-based, sleep more, run, move, give, and always give, and check our assumptions. Check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. Thank you all for being here. I love you. Sorrel loves you more. Bye-bye.
Until tomorrow.